Hi guys, today I'm here to talk to you about the 2018 YA Book Prize. This year I am a YA Book Prize judge, which means I get to read the shortlist, then have my say on which book wins, which I'm very excited about. I love the YA Book Prize and this video is sponsored by them, and I am going to give you a rundown on all the books on the shortlist. I love the prize so much because it highlights UK and Irish authors, and obviously I'm very passionate about UK YA. I run UK YA chat over on Twitter every Friday at 8 PM if you don't know, and I've pretty much spent my whole blogging life dedicated to spreading the word about UK YA, and so it's a really lovely privilege to be able to judge the prize this year. So there are some really good books on the shortlist. I'm going to talk through all of them with you now so you can read them too or have your say if you've already read them. I'm not going to go into too much specific detail, especially if I've read this book, because obviously it's not fair on the authors if I'm judging the prize and then I go slating their books, but I'm going to show you what they're about and talk a bit about them, about the author's other books, and just spread the word about amazing UK YA books. So the first book on the shortlist is The One Memory of Flora Banks by Emily Barra. You may have heard of this because it was one of the Zoella Book Club choices, I think about a year ago now, and so lots of people read it then. It's been a really huge hit since it was released and is about a girl called Flora who loses her memory and has no recollection of the events in her life. And on the surface it seems like a book all about memory, but as you delve in deeper to it, it's a thriller about why Flora loses her memory and what is causing her to do this. And there's also a boy, and when she meets him, that is when she starts to remember things. And so it takes what should be quite an interesting subject and adds this thriller twist. So lots of you who love thrillers are probably going to love this. Something a little bit different about this book from some of the other books on the shortlist is this very quick, fast-paced nature. And one of the things I love most about UK YA is that it's quite chilled, quite relaxed, but this is something very different, and so I think it's a real standout book and I can see why so many people have loved it. If you want something that's going to keep you on your toes, then this is the book for you. The second shortlisted book is Stags by Ma Bennett. This is another very different UK YA book, and I love the range of books that is featured on the shortlist this year. I have to admit that I'm not a huge fan of scary horror books, but I can really appreciate them for the art that they are, and that is why I'm very excited to read Stags, because it's not my usual go-to book, but it's always good to read something outside of your comfort zone, and this is definitely going to test my nerves. I just know it already. This is published by Hotkey Books, and on the back of all their books they have a wheel that shows some of the contents, and this one says Invitation, Kiss, Hunted, Betrayal, and it takes 9 students, 3 blood sports and 1 deadly weekend. It really is going to test me, but it is, like I said, good to read something that you maybe aren't fully comfortable with, and I love that more books like this are coming out, because I think something that YA is lacking is horror books, something that really pushes you to the next level and makes you think, oh my gosh, it's like I was watching a horror film rather than reading a book. Just in case you were wondering how creepy this book is, the first line is, I think I might be a murderer. If you're not hooked from that first line, then I don't know what you will be hooked by, because that is amazing. Next up on the shortlist we have an insanely popular book, and it is La Belle Sauvage, which is the first book of Dust Book by Philip Pullman. Now, I've already done a full video on this book, which I did for Penguin Platform, which talks about whether you can read this first before Northern Lights. I've already read this, so I'm not going to go into too much detail because, again, I don't want to say like this is my favourite book. I want this one to win because that would be giving hopes to authors and things like that, and I don't want to do that. But I will tell you that La Belle Sauvage is about a boy called Malcolm, and if you've read Northern Lights then you'll know about the world that it's set in, but if you haven't, then the book is set in a world where each person has a demon. So this is a little creature that follows you around and is pretty much an embodiment of your soul. I don't know if I'm getting that fully right because it's very hard to explain, but I love the world that Philip Pullman has created, and I think that if you've read Northern Lights then you'll really enjoy this, and if you haven't you can also get something out of it too. I think that because I've already read this, I might try and read Northern Lights as part of the shortlist just because I haven't done that yet, and so it would be nice to be able to judge it knowing the full scale of love the world that Philip Pullman has created in the book. It's also a real beauty of a book. It's so gorgeous, and I really think that this is a world that everybody either already loves or will love when they read it. From a previous YA Book Prize winner, we have Moonrise by Sarah Crossan, and I love Sarah Crossan's books because I think they're super accessible. If you don't like reading or aren't confident at reading, then I think you'll get something great out of these, because she writes in freestyle poetry, and so you read the book and it's set out like a poem throughout, so you get lots of individual poems that make up the whole story. This is about a boy called Joe whose brother Ed is on death row, and the book starts as Ed has been set a date where he is going to die. And I find the concept of death row fascinating because we don't have anything like that in the UK, and I know that this is going to really tug at my heartstrings. I read one by Sarah Crossan a few years ago and cried my eyes out at the end because it was so emotional, and I love the way that she captures characters and real life stories and makes you really believe in the characters and their lives. So this is going to be a brilliant book. I can already tell. They don't take too long to read, but they're the kind of read that you don't forget even after you finish them. So I am so excited to read this. I also love this cover. I love how when you pull it out, there's the silhouette of the moon and it looks like that. And I just think it's going to be one that people pick up and don't forget in a hurry. From one of my favourite UK YA authors, we have It Only Happens in the Movies by Holly Bourne. She is a seriously talented writer. She wrote the Spinster Club trilogy, which is one of my favourite YA trilogies, and I love how real her books are, how they capture girls doing what girls do best, this girl power, fighting for what you believe in. And this looks at romance and how romance is portrayed on screen and how that's actually not what romance is like in real life. And I'm finding that YA books now are really tackling romance and how they don't fully set out this course of a romance that is very cliche and very over the top and very perfect, and I'm loving how YA is breaking that down and actually speaking in a very real sense for once, and I know that this is going to give me all the feminist YA reading that I need to do, and I just love Holly Bourne's books, so if you haven't read any then I really think you should, and this would be a great place to start. In a more feminist YA reading on the shortlist this year is Things a Bright Girl Can Do by Sally Nicholls. This is a book I've wanted to read for ages, but I'm really glad that it's on the shortlist because this year is 100 years since some women got the vote, and so I think it's a very timely read that will really teach you a lot about women's suffrage. I think one of the great things about this book is going to be the fact that it highlights teenagers. So when we think about women's suffrage, we often think of figures like Emmeline Pankhurst and Sylvia Pankhurst, adults who were leading the suffrage movement. But there were obviously teenagers in 1914 Britain when this was set, and they wanted the vote too. And I think it's again timely because there are amazing teenagers in our society today, such as the teenagers in America who are fighting against gun violence. And I think that when we look at teenagers and what they can do, we are constantly amazed. And I really love how this is a YA book about women's suffrage and doesn't just set out the plain facts, also looks at voices that we don't often think about in relation to women's rights. It's also got a romance between two girls, which I can't wait to read about, and I just think it's going to be a book that I love. I already can't wait to read it, and I think that if you're looking for a book about women's suffrage, then look no further than Things a Bright Girl Can Do. Next up on the shortlist we have Release by Patrice Ness, and I'm excited to read this one because it is partly inspired by Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf, which is one of my favourite books, and I'm really interested in how classics and YA intersect. Patrice Ness is up there with the best known YA writers. He wrote The Knife of Never Letting Go, A Monster Calls, which was recently made into a film, and I've also read another book of his which is More Than This, which I really loved. More Than This was very different, and I liked that about it, how I didn't know what was going to happen next, and I expect that Release will be the same. In Mrs. Dalloway's style, the book starts with Adam would have to get the flowers himself, and I'm sure that I'm going to be talking about this a lot once I've read it, because I want to do a video all about YA and classics and how the two go together and how YA has been inspired by classics, so I can't wait to read Release. Last year's winner of the YA Book Prize also features on this year's shortlist, and it is Patrice with Indigo, Doughnuts. I've already read half of this and I'm really enjoying it, and it's about a girl called Indigo who lives with her foster parent, and set in a time when she meets a boy called Bailey, and the book talks about the way that their lives collide and the things that are going on in both of their lives. It's clear to see when you read this why Patrice won the YA Book Prize last year, because her books really deliver this sense of realism that I don't think you get in other UK YA, but also capture something that is so perfectly UK YA that's why I love it so much. She reminds me of very traditional UK YA that came out when UK YA was first starting, such as books by Karen David, which I love, that really highlight voices that aren't often heard, and I love her writing. I think that she's gonna deliver every single time, and I can't wait to read the other half of this. Another author that also featured on last year's shortlist is Alex Wheatle with Straight Outta Crongton. I love his YA book series. I think that they're so funny but also very true, and the way that they're written is fantastic, and I can't wait to read the latest instalment in this trilogy. The books aren't follow-ups, they are individual, you can read them as standalones, but they are set on the same estate, Crongton, and I just love how you read them and really know the characters inside and out. Alex Wheatle has been described by SF Said as remaking the English language with tremendous verve, a major voice in British children's literature, and I couldn't say it better myself. And I can talk about this book all day, but I think it's not until you read it that you'll find out how clever and funny and fantastic it is. And then the final book on this year's shortlist is After the Fire by Will Hill. Now I could try and sum this book up for you, but I'm not going to be able to do it as well as the blurb on the back, so I'm just going to read this because I don't want to miss anything out. So it says, Father John controls everything inside the fence, and Father John likes rules, especially about never talking to outsiders, because Father John knows the truth. He knows what is right and what is wrong. He knows what is coming. Moonbeam is starting to doubt though. She's starting to see the lies behind Father John's words. She wants him to be found out. What if the only way out of the darkness is to light a fire? It sounds very cultish and a bit like one of my other favourite YA books, Seed by Lisa Heathfield, and I am so excited to read something that sounds so different to anything else I've read, and I just love how all the shortlist features very different books that are joined by the fact that we are all in the UK and Ireland and all writing for a UK and Irish audience. In fact, it's one of the books on the shortlist that I'm most curious to read because I've heard so many good things, but I don't think it's one of those books that you're fully going to understand it until you've read it, and so I just cannot wait. I've heard such good things from so many people, haven't heard a bad word about it, so I'm so excited. So those were the books on the YA Book Prize shortlist. I'll leave all the links in the description to where you can find out more about the shortlist and where you can hear from the authors. There is going to be a week dedicated to each book where you can champion the authors on, for example, Team Bourne or Team Crossan. So I'll leave links to that in the description too, where you can find out about that. And I'd also love to know in the comments if you've read any of these books, what you've thought of them, if you have read them, or any that you're really excited to read, and I will see you guys soon. Happy reading!